July 11th, 2021, Lando Norris, one of the most beloved drivers on the Formula One grid, had just finished watching the Euro 2020 final at Wembley Stadium. He was walking back to his car. He was happy, relaxed, just a fan enjoying a football match like anyone else. And then two men approached him, grabbed him from behind, locked his neck in a headlock, and ripped a 144,000-pound watch clean off his wrist, left scratch marks on his arm, and disappeared into the crowd. Now you think that was as bad as it gets. But we're just getting started, because somewhere in Tuscany, Charles Leclerc was being held at knife point. At a circuit in Silverstone, a man dressed in a kilt was sprinting directly into oncoming Formula One cars, doing over 160 miles per hour. At the Red Bull Ring in Austria, a woman was being sexually harassed in the grandstands. And inside the Ferrari garage in Shanghai, a fan was waving his grandstand ticket at team officials, genuinely convinced that the price of admission included a test drive in an F1 car. These are the times Formula One fans went way, way too far. And trust me, some of these stories are going to make your jaw drop. Let's ease into this list with something that honestly starts funny, but gets increasingly wild the more you think about it. It's April 2015. We're at the Shanghai International Circuit for the Chinese Grand Prix. Practice sessions are underway, cars are flying around at full speed, and the paddock is locked down tighter than a vault. Getting into the Ferrari garage, one of the most prestigious, most protected team bases in all of motorsport, requires credentials, a specific pass, background checks. You can't just walk in. That's not how this works. But one particular fan in Shanghai didn't seem to get that memo. Now, this wasn't some teenager who snuck under a fence on a dare. This was a grown adult who had purchased a grandstand ticket, and somewhere along the way convinced himself that the price of that ticket also came with a complimentary go in a Formula One car. And not just any F1 car. He specifically decided he wanted the Ferrari. So what does he do? He scales a 10-foot-high security fence during an active practice session, dashes across the start-finish straight, clears the pit wall, and walks straight into the Ferrari garage. And here's what really gets me. He wasn't trying to hide, he wasn't sneaking around. He walked up to Ferrari team officials, looked them dead in the eyes, and started waving his grandstand ticket at them, pointing at the cars, as if to say, right, I'm here, which one's mine? Ferrari staff, understandably, were completely stunned. They detained him, security arrived, and he was handed over to Shanghai police. No test drive, not even a seat fitting. Now you might laugh at this, and honestly, you should. But step back for a second. This man scaled a security fence during a live F1 session. If he timed it slightly differently, he could have been sprinting across a straight where cars were doing 200 miles an hour. The entire incident got security protocols overhauled overnight at Shanghai. Extra turnstiles, taller fences, mandatory wristband scans for team guests. All because one guy thought his weekend ticket was a Willy Wonka golden pass. And believe it or not, that same year, Formula One had another fan pull a similar stunt. This time, in Singapore. A spectator jumped a barrier on the approach to turn 13 and ran directly across the track, directly in front of Sebastian Vettel, whose Ferrari was barreling toward him at 180 miles per hour. Somehow, nobody was hurt. But the fact that this happened twice in the same calendar year tells you everything about how far some fans are willing to go to get close to this sport. The Austrian Grand Prix disaster, now the Ferrari garage guy, was bizarre. But what you're about to hear is a different level entirely, because this one isn't funny, not even a little bit. It's July 2022, the Red Bull Ring in Spielberg, Austria. It's one of the most popular venues on the entire F1 calendar. Tucked into the Austrian mountains, stunning scenery, a brilliant racing circuit. And that year, over 50,000 Dutch fans had made the journey to watch their hero Max Verstappen compete on home turf. It was supposed to be a celebration weekend. What it turned into was one of the most shameful chapters in Formula One fan history. It started during qualifying on Friday. Lewis Hamilton had a heavy crash, the kind that makes you hold your breath before you know the driver is okay. He walked away unhurt. But when that crash happened, instead of the collective exhale that normally follows a driver climbing out of a wrecked car, a section of the grandstands erupted in cheers, cheering for a crash. Before anyone knew if Lewis Hamilton was conscious, Hamilton himself addressed it directly afterward. He said he found it mind-blowing that fans would cheer in that moment without knowing whether he'd been seriously injured. And look, Lewis Hamilton is one of the most polarizing figures in the sport. Some fans genuinely can't stand him. But there is no world where celebrating the moment a human being potentially breaks their bones is acceptable behavior. That's not passion. That's something much darker. And then the weekend got worse. As the race approached and reports started flooding social media, it became clear that the atmosphere inside the Red Bull Ring had crossed well beyond the line of fan rivalry. Women were being subjected to racist abuse. Homophobic slurs were being directed at other fans. Misogynistic comments were being shouted at people simply because of who they were cheering for. According to multiple reports, one Lewis Hamilton fan had a group of intoxicated men lift up her dress. That's not heckling, that's assault. Formula One issued a formal statement calling the behavior completely unacceptable. Ferrari and Alpine both publicly backed it. The FIA said the grandstands needed to be a safe environment for everyone. And then Toto Wolff, the Mercedes team principal, who, for the record, is not known for being the most emotionally expressive man in the paddock, absolutely let rip. He told reporters, and I'm paraphrasing here because this is a family sport, to essentially get out and never come back. Sebastian Vettel said, whoever those people were should be banned from racing events for life. And Max Verstappen, whose own fans were largely responsible, stood up in the post-race press conference and said, these things shouldn't happen. A normal human being should think like that and should behave like that. And Mercedes took one more step. They found the Hamilton fan who had been abused, and they invited her into the Mercedes garage for the final 20 laps of the race. They gave her the experience of a lifetime to make up for what had been done to her. It was a beautiful gesture, but it never should have been necessary. Lando Norris robbed at Wembley. Now, speaking of Lewis Hamilton fans, let me tell you about the night Lando Norris almost didn't make it to the next race. July 11, 2021, England had just lost the Euro 2020 final to Italy on penalties at Wembley Stadium. Norris, a British guy, a football fan, just 21 years old at the time, had attended the game with friends. He parked his McLaren GT in a VIP car park outside the stadium. And as he was heading back to his car, chatting with people winding down after the match, two men started circling him. Lando Norris gave his account to police, and it later came out in court during the trial. He said suspect one came up behind him, pulled him backward by the neck, putting him in a full headlock so he was facing the sky and couldn't see his attacker. While suspect one had him restrained, suspect two started grabbing at his left wrist. His Richard Mille RM6702 watch, one of only 5 of that specific model in existence, valued at roughly 144,000 pounds, was yanked off his arm with enough force to leave scratches. Then both men ran. It was over in seconds. Norris was left standing in a car park, shaken, in the middle of the chaos of post-match crowds. Now, technically, these weren't F1 fans who targeted him. They were opportunistic thieves who saw a rich young man wearing a very expensive watch. But the broader point here is that Lando Norris's fame, the fame that comes from being one of the most recognizable faces in the world, put him directly in the crosshairs. Being a celebrity in Formula One comes with a price, and sometimes that price is your physical safety. McLaren released a statement describing Norris as unharmed but shaken. When he showed up to the British Grand Prix the following week, he opened up to media and said, "I've been better. I'm not going to lie. Some work to do mentally." He was sitting there, preparing to strap into a car at 180 miles per hour and admitting that the robbery had genuinely affected him psychologically. And believe it or not, that wasn't the last time. The following summer, Norris was on holiday in Marbella, Spain, and was robbed again. Different thieves, same idea. Multiple items taken. The pattern with F1 drivers and high-end watches became so prevalent that it got its own name in media circles. Carlos Sainz lost his Richard Mille after the Italian Grand Prix podium in Monza. It was taken right outside the circuit. Charles Leclerc had his stolen in Tuscany and actually chased the criminals through the streets of Viareggio in his Ferrari before being threatened with a knife and losing them. Formula One's rise in global popularity didn't just bring in new fans. It brought in predators who saw the sport as a hunting ground, and the drivers paid the price. The 2021 Abu Dhabi fallout now, we've talked about physical danger, we've talked about harassment in the grandstands. But the next story is proof that F1 fans can cause serious, lasting damage without ever leaving their bedroom. December 12, 2021, the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix, the most controversial Formula One race finish in the modern era. If you watched it, you remember it. If you didn't, Lewis Hamilton entered the final lap of the season championship leader. He had the race won. He had the title in his grasp. And then a safety car period was handled in a way that defied the rulebook, allowed Max Verstappen to make a tire stop, restart directly behind Hamilton on fresh rubber, and pass him on the final lap to steal the championship. Race director Michael Masi made the call. A driver named Nicholas Latifi had crashed in the closing stages, bringing out that safety car. Neither of those men chose what happened. Latifi didn't crash on purpose. Masi, whatever you think of his decision, was doing his job. However, controversially, but here's where it stopped being a debate about sporting regulations and started becoming something genuinely disturbing. Lewis Hamilton fans went nuclear, and the targets weren't Mercedes or the FIA or the rule book. The targets were Michael Masi and Nicholas Latifi, a driver who crashed his car. The abuse that flooded both men's social media in the hours and days after Abu Dhabi was not just criticism. It was threats. Serious, personal, violent threats, severe enough that it was publicly reported to have impacted the mental health of those targeted. Masi quietly disappeared from his role as race director in the months that followed. Latifi, in a 2022 interview, spoke about the psychological weight of what he experienced after that race. A man who crashed his car, something that happens in Formula One every single weekend, was receiving death threats. And it wasn't isolated to those two. In a 2022 interview with a British newspaper, Lando Norris confirmed he personally received death threats. Not for doing something wrong, just for existing and competing in the sport. Sky Sports presenter Rachel Brooks asked Max Verstappen a perfectly reasonable post-race question following the penalty at the Spanish Grand Prix, and the online mob descended on her so viciously as she disabled comments, tags, and mentions across all of her social media platforms. Channel 4's Lee McKenzie did the same after receiving savage personal attacks about her appearance. And here's the data to prove this is a real crisis, not just isolated incidents. Analysts at BuzzRadar examined over 100 million Formula One conversations across social media between 2016 and 2024. What they found was that negative interactions in the F1 online community more than doubled, going from 8% of all interactions to 20%. And the 2021 Abu Dhabi race remained by far the single most toxic moment in that entire 8-year window, generating over 100,000 negative interactions in their data set alone. 3 years later, simply using the words Masi and safety car in the same sentence in an F1 comment section was enough to restart the war. These are people who have never driven a Formula One car, who will never stand on a podium, who have no personal stake in the outcome of a race, deciding to send death threats to real human beings. That's not fandom. That's something else entirely. The priest who almost got F1 drivers killed. Now everything we've covered so far has been intense. But this final story is in a category completely by itself, because this one could have ended with multiple people dead. It's July 20th, 2003, the British Grand Prix at Silverstone, one of the oldest, most celebrated races in Formula One. The grandstands are packed, the cars are flying, and halfway through the race, at full racing speed, on one of the fastest sections of the entire circuit, something impossible happens. A man in a kilt runs onto the track, not near the track, not outside the barrier, onto the track. The hangar straight, an open high-speed section where the cars were doing approximately 160 miles per hour. And this man isn't running away from the cars, he's running toward them. He's holding a homemade sign that reads, "Read the Bible is always right." And he is sprinting directly into oncoming Formula One traffic. The drivers had fractions of a second to react. At 160 miles per hour, you cover the length of a football pitch in about a second and a half. There is no time to think. There is no time to brake. You just swerve and pray. Cars scattered across the track trying to avoid him. A trackside marshal with extraordinary bravery rugby tackled him to the ground and dragged him off the circuit before he could be killed, or before a driver swerved into another car trying to avoid him. His name was Neil Horan, a former Catholic priest who had been laicized, removed from the clergy. He carried those signs to the circuit with him that day. This wasn't a spontaneous act. He had planned it, and when police asked him about it afterward, he claimed that spotting an open gate onto the circuit was a sign from God, that he was meant to be there. The court didn't buy it. He was convicted of aggravated trespass and sentenced to 2 months in prison. Drivers later voted the Neil Horan incident the scariest moment of the entire 2003 season. Think about what that means. Formula One drivers, people who regularly travel at over 200 miles per hour, inches away from concrete barriers, with nothing but a thin layer of carbon fiber between them and certain death, said a man running onto a track with a Bible sign was the moment they were most frightened that year. And the story doesn't end in Silverstone, because Neil Horan came back. The following year, he attempted to disrupt the 2004 Epsom Derby horse race and was only stopped by security who recognized him. So he pivoted. He flew to Athens for the 2004 Olympic Marathon. Brazilian athlete Vanderlei de Lima was leading the race by 48 seconds, close enough to be essentially guaranteed the gold medal. He was a lap from making history, and Neil Horan ran out of the crowd, grabbed him, and shoved him off the course. De Lima lost 20 seconds of his lead. He eventually finished third. The Brazilian Track Federation petitioned the IOC to award him the gold medal. Regardless, the IOC refused. A man who had already been jailed for running onto an F1 track at 160 miles per hour went on to physically assault an Olympic athlete and cost him a gold medal. He received a €3,000 fine and a suspended sentence. And look, as insane as Horan's story is, it wasn't the only time someone ran onto an F1 track. In 1992, after Nigel Mansell won the British Grand Prix, hundreds of fans stormed Silverstone to celebrate. It would have been a beautiful moment, except the other cars hadn't crossed the finish line yet. Drivers were still at racing speed coming through Woodcote. They were swerving to avoid a literal crowd of fans who had poured onto the circuit. Somehow, by some miracle, nobody was killed. In 2022, Just Stop Oil protesters glued themselves to the circuit and sat down on the track at Silverstone during the opening lap, with cars still moving. 7 people were arrested. The race was red flagged, and every team principal, every driver, every official in the paddock had to spend the next hour wondering if one of those protesters was about to end their season or their life. Formula One is the most thrilling, technically brilliant, dangerous sport on the planet. The drivers risk their lives every single weekend for the entertainment of millions. And the vast, overwhelming majority of those millions are incredible fans who love this sport in exactly the right way. But these stories, these are the ones that remind us where passion ends and something far more reckless begins. Whether it's running onto a live circuit at 160 miles per hour, robbing drivers in car parks, threatening journalists online, or harassing fellow fans in the grandstands, there is a line, and every single person in this video crossed it. If you made it to the end, drop a comment below. Which of these is the most insane to you? Because honestly, I still can't decide. Make sure you like this video and subscribe if you want to see more, and I'll catch you in the next one.